Rain falls softly on the streets of Seattle. Emily Parker, 24, sits alone in her wheelchair, her eyes full of hope and hesitation. She's just been rejected on a blind date, feeling invisible in a world that often overlooks her. But as the city glimmers in the rain, a kind stranger, Jake Miller, 27, a mechanic with warm eyes and grease-stained hands, appears with an umbrella. Little does she know, this chance encounter will change everything, bringing trust, laughter, and a journey of love and healing neither of them expected. Like, share and subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. The rain fell steadily over Seattle that evening, tapping against the cafe windows like a soft rhythm of heartbreak waiting to happen. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon pastries. Emily Parker sat by the window, nervously adjusting her blue scarf as she waited for her blind date. Her heart raced with hope and fear all at once. It had taken her weeks to build up the courage to say yes to a date again. Maybe, she thought, this could finally be the start of something new after so many lonely years. Her wheelchair was polished, her hair neatly curled, and she wore the same soft smile she practiced in the mirror earlier that day. Every time someone walked in, she straightened up, glancing toward the door. She wasn't ashamed of her wheelchair, not anymore, but people's reactions still hurt sometimes. All she wanted was to be seen for who she truly was, a woman with dreams, warmth, and love to give. When Ryan finally entered, she recognized him immediately from his photo. Tall, confident, and dressed sharply in a dark jacket. He spotted her, smiled briefly, then his eyes shifted downward toward her chair. That small change in his expression hit Emily like a cold wind. His smile faltered. Hesitation crept in. Still, she waved and said, "Hi, Ryan." Her voice trembled slightly, but she kept it bright, hopeful, almost pretending she didn't notice the awkward silence that followed. He walked over slowly, sitting across from her, his eyes darting around like he wanted to be anywhere but there. "You didn't mention this," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the wheelchair. Emily's stomach sank. "I didn't think it mattered," she replied softly. "It doesn't," he said quickly, though his tone betrayed him. He glanced at his phone, avoiding her eyes. "Actually, something came up. I should probably go." The words came out clumsy, but the meaning was painfully clear. Before she could respond, he was already standing, muttering an apology that sounded more like escape. Emily watched him leave through the rain-streaked window, his silhouette fading into the blur of traffic and umbrellas. Her heart ached, not because she liked him, but because it felt like every rejection reminded her she wasn't enough for this world. The coffee on her table had gone cold, untouched. She blinked rapidly, forcing herself not to cry in front of strangers. But a single tear escaped anyway, landing silently on her napkin. The barista gave her a sympathetic look, offering to refill her cup, but Emily declined. She didn't want pity. She just wanted to feel normal again. She wheeled herself toward the door, her movements quiet and measured. Outside, the rain had grown heavier, bouncing off the pavement and glistening under the streetlights. She pulled up her hood and rolled toward the crosswalk, trying to hold her composure. But inside, her thoughts screamed with loneliness, with exhaustion. "Maybe I'm not meant for love," she whispered under her breath. At that exact moment, someone rushed past, holding a car part under one arm and an umbrella in the other. He stopped suddenly and turned around. "Hey, you okay?" His voice carried warmth that cut through the cold night. Emily blinked, startled. The man was rugged, wearing a dark jacket covered in grease stains, his hands rough but his eyes impossibly gentle. "You look like you've had a rough day," he said, offering a soft smile. She managed a small nod, embarrassed. "Just one of those nights." He tilted his head. "Yeah, I've had plenty of those." He stepped closer, making sure the rain didn't hit her. "Name's Jake," he said, his voice casual yet caring. "I'm just grabbing some coffee after work. You need help getting anywhere?" She hesitated. People had offered help before, but usually out of obligation, not kindness. Yet something about Jake felt different, genuine. "I'm fine," she said softly, "but thank you." Jake didn't push. Instead, he stood beside her a moment, holding the umbrella over both of them. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the rain. Then Jake chuckled lightly. "You know, this weather's perfect for coffee and bad jokes." Emily looked up, surprised by the unexpected humor. "Oh, really?" she said, a small smile forming. "Got one for me?" "What did one tire say to the other?" He grinned. "Let's roll." It was ridiculous, childish even, but Emily laughed. A real laugh, one that eased the tension in her chest. For the first time that night, she felt seen, not as someone broken, but as a person worth talking to. When the rain slowed, Jake offered to walk her to her car. She nodded, grateful, as he matched his pace to her wheels. Along the way they talked, just simple things at first. She learned he worked as a mechanic at a small garage nearby, loved fixing old cars, and dreamed of owning his own workshop someday. He learned she was an artist who painted for therapy, though she hadn't shown her work in public since the accident. Their words flowed easily, as though they'd known each other longer than a few minutes. When they reached her car, Emily looked at him, unsure what to say. "Thank you, Jake, for being kind," he shrugged, smiling. "You'd be surprised how rare that is." She nodded quietly. "Yeah, I know." He leaned against his truck, watching her load her chair. "You know," he said after a pause, "that wheelchair could use some better wheels. Maybe I could fix it up for you sometime." She blinked in surprise. "You'd do that?" He smiled again, softer this time. "It's what I do. I fix things." Emily didn't know why, but that line stayed in her mind long after she drove away. Maybe it wasn't just about the wheelchair. Maybe, just maybe, this stranger with oil-stained hands and kind eyes had appeared in her life for a reason. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope, a fragile spark glowing through the storm that had once felt endless. And somewhere in that Seattle rain, something quietly began to change. The next morning, Emily woke to sunlight streaming through her apartment window, cutting across her half-finished paintings and scattered brushes. For the first time in months, she didn't dread the day ahead. She kept thinking about Jake, the way he smiled without pity, the warmth in his voice, and how he stood with her in the rain like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't expect to see him again, yet a quiet curiosity tugged at her heart. Maybe she wanted to. Maybe she needed to. Later that week, Emily's wheelchair started squeaking again, one wheel catching slightly on the floor. She sighed in frustration, tapping it lightly. Then Jake's words echoed in her mind. "Maybe I could fix it up for you sometime." She looked up his garage name online, Miller's Auto and Repair, just 15 minutes away. She hesitated for a long moment, debating whether it was silly to go, but something inside her whispered, "Go anyway." So she did. The smell of oil, metal, and rubber filled the air as she rolled into the garage. It was small but tidy, tools hanging neatly on the wall, sunlight filtering through an open door. Jake was bent over an engine, grease streaked across his forearm, music playing softly from an old radio. When he saw her, his face lit up. "Well, look who rolled in," he said with a teasing grin. Emily blushed slightly. "You said you could fix wheels." "I'm cashing in that offer." Jake laughed, wiping his hands on a rag. "Best customer I've had all week." He wheeled her closer to his workbench, studying her chair like it was a vintage car. "Worn bearings, uneven balance. No wonder it's giving you trouble." Emily watched, amused. "You talk about it like it's alive." He smiled. "Machines have personality too. You just gotta listen." There was something poetic about the way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about metal, but people too. For hours, Jake worked carefully, explaining each adjustment as he went. Emily found herself laughing at his stories, about customers who used duct tape as a miracle cure, or how he once built a go-kart out of lawnmower parts as a kid. Every so often he glanced up, meeting her eyes with a smile that lingered a little too long. She felt her heart skip in ways she hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was the way he made her feel seen without trying, or maybe it was just his quiet kindness. By afternoon, her wheelchair rolled smoother than ever before. "Give it a try," Jake said proudly. Emily pushed gently and gasped. The movement was effortless, light as air. She spun around laughing. "Jake, this feels amazing." He grinned, crossing his arms. "Told you I fix things." She stopped in front of him, her eyes shining. You didn't just fix it. You made it better. For a moment their smiles met and held, the world narrowing down to the sound of music and the hum of connection neither could deny. Over the next few weeks, Emily found herself stopping by the garage often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with sketches of designs for her chair, which Jake eagerly admired. "You've got talent," he said once, holding one of her drawings. "You should sell these," she shrugged. "I paint for me now. The rest doesn't matter." But Jake's words stuck with her. Each day, as they talked, worked, and shared quiet laughter, her confidence began to rebuild itself piece by piece, just like the chair he repaired. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Jake was working on a car while Emily painted quietly in the corner. "You ever wonder," she said softly, "why life takes everything, then suddenly gives something back?" Jake paused, looking up. "Yeah," he said after a moment, "maybe to see if we're strong enough to keep believing." Emily stared at him, realizing how much he understood without her having to explain. "You're wiser than you look," she teased. He laughed. "Guess that's what happens when you talk to engines all day. They teach patience." When her painting was done, she showed him a bright blue wheelchair surrounded by clouds and open sky. "It's called freedom," she said. Jake stared at it, genuinely moved. "That's beautiful," he whispered. "It feels like hope." Emily smiled shyly. "It's the color you added to my chair. Reminds me that broken things can still be beautiful." Jake turned away slightly, hiding a smile. "You're something else, Emily." His tone was soft, almost reverent. The air between them shifted, thick with unspoken emotion neither dared name yet. As days turned into weeks, their bond deepened in quiet ways. Jake would bring her favorite snacks. She'd bring homemade cookies. Sometimes they'd just sit in silence, comfortable, the world fading beyond the soft hum of the radio. Emily began painting again, this time with purpose. Her colors grew brighter, her lines bolder. She even started planning an art exhibit, inspired by the people who helped her see beauty again. At the center of her new collection stood a single piece she hadn't yet shown anyone, one she titled The Mechanic. One evening, as she was leaving the garage, Jake called out, "Hey, Emily." She turned, smiling. "Yeah?" He scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "There's this charity car show downtown this weekend. They've got food, music. Maybe you'd like to come with me." Emily's heart fluttered. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was real, simple, honest, and kind. She nodded. "I'd love that." Jake smiled, relief softening his features. "Cool, it's a date. Well, not a date unless—" Emily laughed. "Relax, Jake. Let's just call it a good day waiting to happen." As she wheeled away under the fading orange sky, she looked back at the small garage that had somehow become her sanctuary. It wasn't just a place where her wheelchair was fixed. It was where her heart began to heal. Jake watched her go, his chest warm with feelings he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. Meeting Emily had changed something deep inside him. And for both of them, this was only the beginning of something neither expected, but both needed desperately. The night of the art exhibition arrived with a quiet chill in the air. Downtown Seattle was alive with glowing streetlights, music from nearby cafes, and people gathering inside the bright glass gallery. Emily sat in her newly customized wheelchair, her hands trembling slightly as she looked at her paintings hung across the walls. Each piece told a part of her story, pain, healing, and hope. But the one she saved for last stood in the center, a portrait of a man fixing a wheelchair under soft golden light. Its title read, The Mechanic. Jake walked in moments later, his hair still slightly messy from work, wearing a clean shirt that didn't quite hide the grease stains on his hands. He looked around, his eyes landing on Emily. The pride in his smile made her chest tighten. "Wow," he said, walking closer. "You did all this?" She nodded nervously. "Yeah, I almost backed out, but then I thought of you, how you never gave up fixing things." "So I didn't either," Jake grinned. "Guess we're both kind of stubborn, huh?" The crowd slowly gathered around her paintings, murmuring words like inspiring and powerful. Emily watched, overwhelmed by the warmth of it all. For years, she had hidden behind her fears, her pain, and the idea that people would only see her chair, not her art. But tonight, they saw her. Every brushstroke carried her story. Jake stood beside her, his hand brushing against hers on the wheel. "You're incredible, Emily," he whispered. "I'm proud of you." Her heart fluttered. "You helped me believe I could be again." Later that evening, the gallery owner announced Emily to say a few words. She rolled to the front, her voice trembling at first. "A year ago, I thought my story was over," she began. "But then someone reminded me that broken things aren't the end. They're the beginning of something new. These paintings are pieces of my heart, but one person in this room helped me see color again when all I saw was gray." Her eyes met Jake's. "He didn't fix my wheels. He helped me move forward." When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Jake clapped the loudest, his eyes glistening. Emily rolled toward him afterward, her voice soft. "I meant every word." Jake looked down at her, smiling shyly. "You changed my life too, you know. Before you, it was just work, fix, repeat. But you made me remember what purpose feels like." She laughed gently. "So we fixed each other?" He nodded. "Yeah, looks like it." For a long moment they just looked at each other, saying everything words couldn't. After the exhibition ended, they stepped outside together into the cool night. The city lights danced on wet pavement, the same way they had the night they met. Only this time, Emily wasn't crying. She was glowing. "You know," Jake said, hands in his pockets, "I almost didn't go for coffee that night. I'd had a long day, almost went straight home." She smiled. "Guess fate had other plans," he chuckled. "Yeah, maybe fate's got a sense of humor." They stood in silence, feeling the weight of how much had changed. Jake reached down, gently brushing his fingers against hers. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked softly. Emily looked up at him, her eyes shining. "All the time," she said. "But for the first time, it doesn't scare me." He smiled. "Good, because I've been working on something." From his truck, he pulled out a small box. Inside was a sleek, custom-made wheelchair rim, lightweight, modern, with her name engraved on it. "It's part of my new project," he said. "Mobility designs for people who deserve better than what the world gives them." Emily's voice caught in her throat. "Jake, this is beautiful." He shrugged, pretending nonchalance. "Just something I've been tinkering with. But maybe we could start a business together. Your art, my mechanics, a team that builds hope." Her eyes widened. "You mean it?" He nodded. "I do. We'll call it Motion and Heart. What do you think?" She smiled so widely it made him laugh. "I think it's perfect." The world around them faded as they stood under the city lights, two dreamers who had found healing in each other's courage. Weeks passed, and their project took life. Jake's garage transformed into a workshop filled with color and purpose. Emily painted the walls, adding bursts of blue and gold. Together, they built custom wheelchairs that were not only functional, but beautiful. Each one unique, designed for confidence. Clients came from all over, drawn by their story and sincerity. Emily would tell each customer, "You're not broken. You just need something built for your kind of strength." And Jake, always nearby, would smile proudly, his hands steady, his heart full. One evening, after finishing their last order for the day, they sat outside the garage, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. Jake turned to her. "You ever realize how far you've come?" Emily smiled softly. "Yeah, but I didn't do it alone." He reached for her hand, fingers intertwining. "Neither did I." The wind carried the faint scent of rain, and for a moment time stood still. Jake leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers. "You fixed more than your chair, Emily," he whispered. "You fixed my heart." Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't from sadness, they were from gratitude. "And you taught me love isn't about walking or standing, it's about showing up." They stayed there, in that quiet, golden moment, two souls once broken now whole again. The sound of laughter and distant engines filled the air as twilight settled over the city, and as the mechanic and the girl in the wheelchair watched the stars appear, their hearts moved in perfect rhythm. Proof that sometimes love doesn't just find you, it rebuilds you piece by piece.